Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another one of my live videos. I wanted to hop on here real quick and just talk about this learning process that comes from martial arts, but also just some things that I have learned in my decades of training. My name is Darren Dumas. I am the owner and instructor at the Bujinkan Dojo here in Roseville, California. My primary martial art is Bujinkan Budo Taijutsu, but I also have many years of training in other arts as well. I have friends around the world from many different martial arts, and I talk to them regularly. We swap different ideas and discuss different things. And it's always interesting to see a lot of the shared thoughts and shared ideas that we have. Even though we come from different arts, we really aren't much different. And I think that's really important here. But one of the things I wanted to talk about is this idea that martial arts reveal really significant things about ourselves. And sometimes they're very, very bitter things about ourselves. That sometimes self-awareness can be a bitter medicine that we really need. And martial arts themselves, just like many other things in life, um, is a perfect place to discover that kind of stuff and to work through them. It's one thing to have your weaknesses pointed out. It's another thing to once you discover those things, to also then work on them in a way that produces results. So what I want to share with you is just kind of my ideas about that, and maybe provide some helpful insight that you might find benefits you. Um, and these are some things that I myself apply in my own life, because we're all human beings and we all go through the same kind of challenges. The difference is that what do we do with those challenges? Because we always have a choice. Um, Particularly anytime you want to change or grow, you want to evolve yourself, you're going to encounter resistance. If there's no resistance, there's no growth. And this actually gets controversial even in martial arts training, that even in the art that I train in, that people resist resistance, which is interesting because it's through resistance that you really get to measure what you know, and you really get to measure your talents and abilities. And I'm not trying to play in this drama argument of whether or not you should have sparring and all this kind of stuff. That's not my point. Resistance comes in many forms, and the biggest resistance, that at least that I believe, is really the resistance you put on yourself. That's the biggest resistance. You want to know who the biggest, most dangerous opponent is in your life? It's you. You're the one. You're the most dangerous, because you know you better than anybody, even though you don't totally know you, because there's a discovery process that happens throughout your life, and you discover things about yourself that you didn't know, or maybe you thought you knew. But you know where your weaknesses are, and you have these things inside you that play on those weaknesses, those little voices that tell you you can't, those little voices that will compare you to somebody else. And those little things, that's the opponent inside of you. When you face off with an opponent in the ring, that person may have studied you a little bit, maybe they train in the same type of style, so they kind of know like where your skills are, what you can do, what you can't do. They know you're not going to do dirty tricks on them or whatever, or they've done some knowledge, but they really don't truly know you. They don't know your internal weaknesses. Maybe they might know a little bit if they've really watched you, but for the most part, they really don't know you. So the first part of a match is always that probing, where you're going in, you're kind of testing them. How does this person move? Where are their patterns at? Where's their rhythm and timing? You can look in their face. You can see what are they thinking about? Where are their eyes going? That's all that process of probing and learning. But when it comes to you facing yourself, there's none of that, because you already know. You already know where your weaknesses are, and that little voice inside your head's going to play that. So where this comes out in martial arts training is that when you walk into a class, you're with a group of people, and it's very normal for people to put on a game face when they come into class. all the time. You wear a uniform or a clothing that you don't wear in any other part of your life generally. And you're showing up with a group of people you may not see at any other time in your life except for when you go to class. So it's a perfect opportunity that you get to pick up this persona that you get to create and present yourself in a certain way. But the truth of the matter is that when you get out there on the tatami or the mat and you start training, then the reality of who you are starts to seep through. Your ego starts to seep through. Your fear starts to seep through. All these things seep through that. So no matter how you were when you came in, the reality comes out as sweat on that mat. And that's my point, is that you have to sweat. Nothing ever truly of value has ever been obtained without the pain of achieving it. You have to go through that process. And this is where people blow it. This is where people fail, not just in martial arts, but in life. Because once they encounter that resistance and they start to experience the unpleasantness of it, they back off. Because it's a primal instinct in your brain to not be uncomfortable. It's a primal instinct in your brain to seek comfort, pleasure, security. This is all what we're hardwired to seek, and we relate that to everything we do. That once we reach that point where things start to kind of push back, and then we're like, oh, how quickly we go, oh, okay, and we back off. We may kind of be on that point. We may push ourselves to the point where we're on that line um, between discomfort and comfort, and maybe we tiptoe into the discomfort, like walking into a cold pool, right? Maybe you put your foot in there, your feet, but at some point your brain starts to go, okay, I think I've gone in enough, and you find a point where it's still kind of uncomfortable, but you can tolerate it, and then you stand there, and then you get out. And most people go through life in that same idea. And I see it in martial arts all the time. And the way people train is that they will train on something and they'll do it for a little bit. They'll struggle with it. They'll start to get, and then they reach a certain point of good enough. And once they reach that good enough part, then they stop. Then that's when they're talking to their buddy and they're, or whatever, or they change the technique and they start doing something different. But they reach that point where they just don't progress themselves, push themselves, because maybe they get bored. Maybe there is pain. Maybe the fact that they're starting to get hot, they're wearing this gi jacket they're sweating come out. Maybe that's the only time in their whole day or week that they actually truly sweat is when they come to class. And so when they experience that, then they're, oh, that's not comfortable. And so they back off. Maybe they're hitting that bag and the knuckles are starting to get sore, or whatever. I mean, whatever the reason is, it's an unpleasant reason. Nobody ever stops just because they're enjoying what they're doing. If they enjoy what they're doing, they're going to want to keep doing it. So it's the lack of joy. It's when their brain says, "Oh, this is not comfortable. You should back off," because the brain interprets discomfort as danger. The brain doesn't know the difference. The brain responds to stimulus. So if you're feeling pain in your body, you're feeling discomfort, you're starting to exude yourself in sweat, the brain thinks that you're doing that for a reason. You're going through that for a reason. It must be dangerous. So if I choose to just back off, all that discomfort goes away. So backing off is leading me to where I'm safer. And that's a hardwired thing. But you have to learn to. I struggle with martial arts as technique practicing. Yes, exactly. And that's a perfect example. And that's where there is a frustration that happens with people, especially if they're not getting it. If there's that one part, they're just not getting it. There's a certain point where people give up. And the process of growing in martial arts is that, yeah, you want to get good in your technique. But the bigger benefit to training in martial arts is that you develop things about yourself that develop quality in everything you do. Oh, hey, Davian. Good to see you, buddy. Or at least see your name. Anyway, my point to all of that is that you have to go through the struggle. And the struggle is different for different people. Everybody has a different struggle. Some people struggle mentally, some people struggle more physically, some people struggle just getting to the school. We all have our struggles. And that's where the character development really becomes almost more important than the technique, because I know people who are great technicians. They're great at their technique. They're great martial artists as far as their movement goes, but they themselves suck. They're just, as far as their character goes, they don't have any honor. They cheat, they lie, whatever. They're not honest. That's a different thing. But the true real person that comes in and trains has to face the ugly parts of themselves. They have to face their laziness. They have to face their attachment to a result. That's a whole other topic there. Anxiety, the root of anxiety is when you attach an expectation to the future, and it's usually a negative expectation. So that fear of failure, that you automatically assume you're going to fail, or that you're not good enough, or that you're going to be embarrassed, or that whatever, that creates anxiety, or that something bad's going to happen. All that creates anxiety. Excitement is attachment to a future with a positive outcome, where you're excited about where something's going to happen. So all of that comes with you when you walk into the dojo. And when you're out there on the mat and you're training and you're getting sweaty and you're getting hit, or you're hitting somebody and it's uncomfortable or whatever, and you're making mistakes, you encounter all that part about yourself. And it's always interesting to see how that person grows through that process, because learning martial arts is a process of failing. You have to fail to learn. That's the process. It's the same when you go to the gym and you're working out, right? You have to reach a point where your muscles begin to fail, because it's when that point of failure comes that the body will start to adapt, because adaptation is where growth happens. You can't adapt unless the body or the mind or whatever, your emotions, whatever, is stimulated to adapt. It has to have a reason to adapt. If all you're doing is going to the point of discomfort but never going into discomfort, you're just there and then you back off. There's no reason to adapt, because what are you adapting to? You're just staying in the comfort zone. So long time ago, I did another video on my Facebook page where I talked about calloused hands. And the analogy of the story of calloused hands is really significant here. Is that when we're born, our hands are like paper thin. We're soft, so soft hands. And as we grow and we learn to do things with our hands and everything, we start to develop a thickening of the skin in the areas that we use for gripping and for other things, and we develop calluses. And the calluses will only grow to the level of where we are continuing to damage them, because calluses is an adaptation to damage. You do things to damage your hands, and your body responds by growing calluses and thickening the skin so that you don't damage your hands anymore. And the way training is, like with the makiwara board, you're punching the makiwara, is that it's a progressive way of building that. So you're damaging the surface, you're damaging the knuckles in a way that you're not permanently damaging, but you're damaging just enough that the body then starts to heal over and create thicker skin, hardening the bones, calcium, et cetera. It starts hardening, starts building it so that your body can do these things without hurting itself. And that's a natural adaptation of your body to do that. It's an endurance adaptation. Your body is learning to endure that. And through training, it's the same way. You stay focused on something, you practice something to create really that adaptation in your mind, to build the mental strength, the emotional strength in order to keep going. And this is why in old arts, they would oftentimes give you some of your first lessons to be doing 1,000 punches or 1,000 cuts. It's that not only to just perfect the technique, but the fact that you can stay focused to do something 1,000 times repetitively during it. It's very uncomfortable to do it. You go through pain, but the mind will also wander. But to keep that sharpness, to build that sharpness, that's that That's the same process. You're going through that process to build that endurance that's going to carry you through the next step in your training. So if you look at the way your hands develop, is that if I'm picking up a rock every day, eventually my hands become calloused up to be able to pick up that rock. But then if I go and I pick up a bigger rock, my hands are going to keep growing and developing. I'm going to go through that same process. It's going to hurt. I'm going to get blisters, cracked skin, whatever. It's going to hurt. But I know if I keep doing it, that's going to thicken up. And then once that no longer hurts, now I'm like, okay, now I need to pick up something more heavier or more rough, and then go through that same process. So it's always this process of discomfort to reach comfort and then discomfort again. And that's my next part, is that um, you have to continually push yourself outside the box. So success is amazing. It feels so good to reach a new level of growth in something. Maybe it's the first time you've thrown somebody in your life, or maybe you've been thrown and you're like, oh, I didn't get hurt. Or maybe you hit that bag and it moves it, or maybe in life you achieve some success. You get that promotion you worked hard for, or that new job that you've been really wanting, or you passed that course, or whatever it is. You've pushed yourself, you've gone through the pain, the displeasure, the discomfort, and just kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and you achieve that result. That's fantastic. Allow yourself to celebrate that. That's important. Allow yourself to celebrate. Acknowledge the success, celebrate it. But here's the problem, the danger. The danger is that if you then back off, if you go, here's my diploma, I did all this work and I achieved this diploma, and you stick it on the wall, and then you sit down in your chair and you just look at it every day. The diploma is still there, but is your life advancing? No. You went through the pain and the process to get that, but now you have that, but now it's like, now what? But in order to do the next, you have to be willing to face the same, or maybe sometimes more, displeasure and discomfort. And in martial arts training, it's the same way, that people reach belt levels and rank and status, and then they stop because they've reached something, they're happy about it, and then they try to ride that happiness. They try to just milk that happiness out of it. And it's short-lived. It only lasts for a certain period, and then it goes away, because if you're not continuing the process of growing, you'll stagnate. Like running water, when it stops, it stagnates. If you're not continuing to grow, you'll stagnate. But in order to grow, what do you have to do? You have to be willing to face all the uncertainty, ugliness, pain, discomfort, all those negative things that you had to face before. You got to face those again. In fact, sometimes you have to face even bigger ones. There's a saying that says every level has a new devil, and the devil keeps getting bigger and bigger. And that's why it's a process. You can't start here like an infant can't run a marathon. It takes a process of development. But if along the way you stop, what happens? If you go to the gym and you start pumping those weights, and every day you go, every time you go, you're getting stronger and stronger, and you increase those weights. But if you just increase to, let's say you get up to 100 pounds, right? Let's throw a number out there, 100 pounds, boom. You start knocking it out. Oh, yeah, I can lift that. It starts getting easier because you're getting stronger. Well, now 100 pounds starts to feel like 80 pounds, starts to feel like 70 pounds, 60 pounds. You're doing this. Boom, boom, boom. But what's going to happen is that you're going to plateau, because you're going to reach a point where that just kind of like is nothing. You're going to go to the gym and you're going to knock out 10, 20 reps of 100 pounds, and you're not even going to break a sweat. Are you growing? You're still doing the same thing that you did over here, but there's no growth. Why? Because there's no discomfort. There's no pain. That's what's missing. It's not the act. It's the challenge that it takes to do that act. Your success is built upon the degree of challenge that it takes to complete that. So as the degree of challenge shrinks because your ability starts increasing, your understanding and everything starts increasing, that challenge starts shrinking. If you don't increase that challenge by adding the next level to what it is you're trying to achieve, this is your growth. The challenge shrinks and your growth shrinks at the same time. So my point to all of this is that martial arts training, you have to be able to continually focus on what challenges you. You have to face that fear. Whatever scares the hell out of you, do it. That's what you have to do. You have to cut through the BS of self pleasure, of focusing on what feels good, and focus on what feels uncomfortable. If you're afraid of crowds, show up to the busiest martial arts class you can train in. If you're scared to get out on the mat to train, be the first one out there. Challenge yourself, because what happens with that is it's a mental process that takes over, and you start finding yourself more confident, because confidence is also a skill that is built through exposing yourself to what shakes your confidence. The more you expose yourself to things that make you feel uncertain about yourself, the more you keep exposing that to yourself, the more you will build certainty in yourself, because you'll start to realize that you can do it. Or like they talk about getting hit, stepping out into the ring and taking that hit. It teaches you that you're not made of glass, that you can take that and keep going. It's okay if you get hit. You can keep going, and you work through that. Look at Rocky. Like, it's one of the big lessons about Rocky is that he takes these crazy hits, and yet he wins because he can take more hits than the other guy. And so, I mean, it's fantasy, it's Hollywood, it's fantasy, but the analogy is still the same, that it's not how many times you get hit, it's how many times you get up. And that's the important part. But people have a hard time with the part about getting hit, because if you get hit and you stay down, the hits stop as long as you stay down. But if you get up, you know that there's going to be more hits. So you have to be the process of endurance, is that willingness to continue to face that pain, face that injury, and the willingness to allow yourself to fail. There's a joke in our martial art, because our martial art has a lot of takedowns and throws. We strike it, we do weapons, all this stuff, but almost always it ends up with the other person on the ground. And so one of the basics of our art is learning how to receive, how to fall, and how to get back up. How to roll, how to break fall, etc., and be able to get back up tactically, quickly, whatever. And so there's a joke about how that our art is the art of falling and getting back up over and over and over again. But I think there's such an important life lesson there, because if you look at every successful person, they'll tell you that how many times they failed until finally they started failing less. But again, you have to be willing to take that chance. If you're a businessman and you build your business through taking risks and investing your money, and then you reach a certain level and then you stop doing that, your income stops, your wealth stops. And now your wealth is built entirely on whether or not that business is going to continue to sustain itself. But the real successful people are always continuing to take risks with their money. They're always continuing to do different things, because they know that they still have this base. They know that they still have this foundation. And so they take these risks, and that's how they achieve next levels. And in life and martial arts, it's the same way, that the more you build yourself, the more calluses you build, you build a base for yourself. Then you keep pushing yourself to the next level, because you're always going to be able to fall back on your base. But if you don't continue to push yourself into that, you'll still have this base, but that's all it's going to be. And if you don't continue to at least maintain that, you're going to get what we call in the fitness world atrophy. Atrophy is when I build all this muscle mass and then I stop working out. The muscle mass starts to deteriorate, and muscle turns to fat when it goes through atrophy. So you'll see guys who used to be really muscular who are now really fat, because all that muscle has turned to fat. They're still eating all the calories, but it's not converting to muscle. It's just they actually get weaker. They may still be big, but functionally they're weaker. So you see this in martial arts all the time. You see guys who, in their prime, when they were training and um, when they're reaching levels, they they stop, and yet they still walk around with their rank and their patches and their status, and they have these fancy websites, and they go and they do these things. But you look at them and they're functionally weaker. They're just not there. Maybe they've gotten fat and unhealthy and they can't move. And it's like, well, who are these guys? Where's that guy? Where's this other guy? This one that built all of that. Where is that guy? That guy died. That guy went to sleep. I didn't say died, because you can always come back. It's just that guy went to sleep. Why did that happen? Because they stopped challenging themselves. They reached a level of comfort. They start getting all this attention. They start getting all this fame. They start getting all this popularity. And they have this cool title, this fancy belt with a million stripes all over it. They have more patches than a NASCAR racer or whatever. You know, they host this, they do a seminar, and 1,000 people show up, and like they have all of this feel good stuff. So there's no discomfort. Where's their discomfort? There's no discomfort. They show up, they're instantly the most popular guy in the room. There's no discomfort. And it's interesting because even in our art, you'll see this a lot. How people will show up to our Soki's class, our Grandmaster's class, and how they're not training hard. They're not uncomfortable. They laugh, they have friends. It's a social hour for them. Maybe they bring their students. Maybe it gives them an opportunity that they can then teach their own classes while they're there and have other people show up. But they themselves, they're not that struggling student. That part went away. The struggling student went away. You look around the room at the people who don't have that status. Look around at the room at people who are the essential nobodies in the room. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I just mean they don't have that. They don't have all of that. They're there to train and learn. You look at those guys. Those are the guys that have sweat coming down. They're the ones that they're breathing hard. They're training. They're learning. Those are the people. You look at that and you're like, all right, that's a martial artist. That person is the person that is truly training. But then you look at these people that their hair is in perfect place. There's no sweat. They look relaxed. They're smiling. They have people all around them. They're not martial artists. I'm sorry if that offends anybody, but they're not. They're I don't know what to call it. It's just that aspect died because they're not willing to be uncomfortable. So again, I go back to your level of success is built on your level of discomfort. And when that discomfort in your training decreases, so will your growth. So you have to be able to do that. A bird doesn't fly without flapping its wings. It has to beat gravity in order to fly. But once it's up in the air and it hits that wind, it can soar. But that bird knows that if it wants to go even higher, it's going to have to flap again. And if that bird doesn't flap at all, and then there's no wind, he's going to come down. And he knows that too. So a lot of people, they achieve success, and that success is like a win. And so they stop trying and they stop flapping their wings. They stop pushing themselves and they just ride that wind. That's somebody riding the success that they've achieved, that certificate on the wall, rank on their belt, all that kind of stuff, or even like learning a new skill or a new talent or whatever. That's them coasting on that wind. But eventually that wind's going to stop. And then they're going to come down. And so they have to be able to keep going. So I encourage you to really consider, how much are you putting yourself into discomfort? How much are you allowing yourself to fail? at something. And I don't mean stupid stuff. Don't make dumb decisions and fail at things that completely destroy you. That's not what I'm talking about here. Um, what I'm talking about here is allowing yourself to fail to the point of being able to recover and come back, because you have to still be able to get up and keep going. If you pump iron to the point where your muscle starts to fail, you know it's starting to fail, and that's when you rack it. You don't wait till it absolutely just drops, because that's how you rip your shoulders out. And if it's a bar, you're going to move it. But you reach a point where, and then you rack it. That's that point of failure. And then give yourself a little bit, and then try to do one more rep, because that's when the workout starts happening. That's when the growth starts happening, is when the body reaches a max, or your mind capacity, whatever, reaches a max, and then you just kind of push yourself that little bit farther. That's where that adaptation happens. Adaptation happens after the fail. So give yourself permission to do that. Fail at little things. Fail at things that are for your growth, and learn from that. That learning from that, and then being able to come back with that new learning experience, that's the adaptation. That's the growth. So I hope you find this enjoyable and helpful. I hope it inspired you. I hope that you will apply this to not only your own training, but in your own life and all the different things that you want to do. It starts with a belief. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe that you can achieve it. And it's not that you're going to achieve it right away. You have to believe in yourself enough that if you keep going and learning and adapting and pushing forward, that you're going to achieve it. That's where self-belief comes in. I don't believe that I can achieve everything I try, but I believe that I can try it. And I believe that through that trial of doing it, I'm going to learn something of value. That's important. You have to have that belief. And so I encourage you to apply that in whatever it is you want to do. And don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks. It only matters what you think. And if you keep doing it, you'll achieve it. The Grand Canyon started from a little trickle of water. It's just, it takes time. Different people, it can be different periods of time. It can take 6 months or 60 years. But don't compare yourself to other people, because we're all different. We're all different. And it's not the result, it's the process that grows you. This paper, this is just blank, but if it was a certificate, this certificate isn't me, it's a certificate. It's a piece of paper. It's not worth it. It's just, this is it. You can tear it, burn it, you can do whatever. It's just paper. But who I become in the process of achieving that, that's the value, that's the quality. So if you're in martial arts, it doesn't matter if you're trying to be a black belt, it's cool. Great, go for it. But it's not the black belt. It's the process to get to that that's important. It's who you become through that process. And none of that happens unless you're willing to face all those negative parts, all those weaknesses within you, all the struggles, the pain, all of that, the displeasure, the frustrations, the feeling like you want to quit, all of that. When you face all of that and then you still keep going, that's the adaptation. That's the part where you grow. Because then when you do reach that, you look back and you go, wow, I'm so glad I did this. I'm so glad I didn't listen to my other self back here that told me to stop, or that told me that, oh, that's good enough. 10 times of doing this technique is good enough. No, listen to the other part that says, no, 10 times, I haven't even gotten started yet. And you just keep going. I mean, really, how many times in class do you see students stop doing a technique before the instructor tells them to stop? Why is that? What makes them stop? And if that's you, ask yourself, why did you stop? Why did you stop training? Why did you stop? If it's a simple thing, wrist twist, whatever. Why did you stop? The instructor didn't tell you to stop. How come you chose to stop? That's a hard question. Ask yourself that. And if you go, well, I mean, I don't know. I kind of felt like I got it. Oh, okay. So you know more than your teacher. Because if your teacher didn't stop you, that's because the teacher wants you to keep practicing it. So these are hard questions, and I'm not trying to be judgmental. I've gone through the same process. I catch myself doing the same thing. It's a constant battle. The biggest battle is always this space between your ears, and martial arts is a perfect place to reveal that. But just know that we all go through this. I don't care who you are, what rank you are. I don't care how long you've been training. Everybody is the same. We all go through the same challenges. It's just the difference. um, Maybe they got tired, their mind quit. That's a fantastic point. And actually, David, what you said is absolutely true. And this happens in fitness. It happens in martial arts. I used to be in the military. I would see it all the time with trainees and soldiers. The brain quits before the body quits. Almost every time your mind will quit. And in survival, that's deadly because when you're fighting for your life, your mind has to push your body beyond what your normal mind thinks it's capable of. And you've seen this in situations. You hear stories about somebody trapped under a car and this person comes over and they're in this freaked state and they lift this car off this person. Any other way, if you were to tell that person, hey, go lift that car, they think you were crazy. They'd go over and they'd start to lift it and they'd just go, they would reach muscle failure and they would drop and they couldn't lift it. Well, what's the difference between then and then? So it's this. The brain is amazing. We haven't even begun to tap into the potential of the brain. The brain can power you to do more than you can even dream of. And that's in your training, that's really the secret. That's really what it's designed to do. So like I know for me in martial arts, I've seen so many people that start out and they can't even they don't even think they're going to be able to do a forward roll or whatever. The idea of throwing somebody is just alien to them, or they see this stuff. Oh my god, there's no way I can do that. Yet they keep showing up, they keep training, and then all of a sudden one day they do it. And you watch that switch in their head, and they go, "Oh my god!" They realize that they did something they never thought they could do. And the magic that comes with that is that once you click that, then you start to question everything else you thought you couldn't do. And that's the big benefit. That's the point. When you pick up that rock for the first time in your hands, it hurts. Maybe you bleed a little bit. It hurts. And you're like, oh my God. But then you keep doing it. And then all of a sudden you're like picking up this rock. And the next thing you know, you're picking up a bigger rock. And then you're getting stronger and you pick up a bigger. Pretty soon you're picking up this huge rock. And yet when you were back there picking up that little rock, you're like, oh, that hurts. If you would have said, oh, you're going to pick up that huge boulder over there, you would have went, no, I'm not. And if you would have tried, you would have realized that, no, I can't. But the process takes you there and you achieve it. It's that process. So I'm going to leave you with one more analogy. This is called tenrin, and this is a Japanese concept that they use in swordsmithing or sword making. Tenrin is also used in martial arts training too. For it's this repetitive conditioning process. But it's interesting to use this analogy that you you look at tannerin as a process of taking raw metal, just a chunk of metal, and you heat it up to the point that it turns to liquid. So you can imagine this tense heat. You heat it up to the point of liquid. But what happens when you heat metal is that the impurities float to the surface. They simmer around on the top of the surface. And then you scoop them out. So through that process of turning a solid to liquid, of heating this metal with this intense heat, is that it separates the impurities. The impurities become exposed. And then you clean that away, and then you allow the metal to cool. Now there's more to this. you cool the metal in a certain way, you pound it into, you create a basic shape, and then you cool it, and then you shape. There's a whole process, and then you go back and you reheat it. And anyway, this process, this circular process of heating, shaping, cooling, shaping, heating, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to eventually, and then folding and all this kind of stuff, to eventually create a sword that is unlike no other. Amazing quality, right? But the quality of that sword is only going to be as good as the impurity that it has in it. Because I don't want to say it's impossible, but it really is extremely difficult to get every impurity out. Because even at a micro level, that impurity can still be there. And that could be the flaw in that sword. And you don't know where in that sword that flaw could be, but it's there. And it could come out at the worst moment possible. But you're the same way. Through training, you expose yourself to intense heat. Intense. It has to be in that training. You have to push yourself beyond your comfort level. That's the heat. And the more you can do that, the more heat that you generate, the more your weaknesses become exposed. You can see them. And because you see them, you can then work on them. And as you work on them, then you reheat yourself, continually challenging yourself and pushing yourself to eventually you start working those weaknesses out. And then you become more pure, more pure. And that shaping process. How do you shape a piece of liquid metal into a sword or into any shape? You have a mold. You follow a mold. What's a mold? A mold is an example. So you have your examples. You have your icons, your mentors, your teachers. You have some idea of what it is you want to take after. And then so you mold yourself when you're in that hot liquid state into that shape. But it's still not functional yet because it still takes the hammering. Hammer. You have to beat that into the right shape. And then the cooling process to solidify and harden it. And then over and over and over again until you reach that point where now it's ready to sharpen. So you have the shape, you have the strength, but now you got to sharpen it. That's that finesse. And that's the process. So martial arts training, true, real martial arts training is that process. But you have to be willing to go through all of that. All of that is violent in a healthy way. It's violent. Extreme heat, fire, heat, turns it to metal. What's that doing? That's breaking you down. It's breaking down your walls. It's breaking down your ego. It's breaking down your illusions about yourself and everything else. It's taking that rigid way about yourself and softening it. And through that softening, the impurities come up, and then filtering those out so that you can then start beating it again. You start pounding it. Now you're gonna reform this thing into a shape and pound it. Boom, boom, boom. Make that. And that's such a difficult, painful process. It's so challenging mentally, physically, emotionally. It's on every level. But the more it challenges you, the more it's going to make you grow, the better you're going to become. Sorry, I can't read this. I always thought holographic technology uses the model of proper martial technology given the hologram. You're probably right. I don't know enough about that. I'm not expert enough on that, but I think you're right. I tend to look at things more on a physical level, where and again using these ancient concepts like Tamrin and stuff. But I mean, there are so many different analogies out there. You can find an analogy that matches. I use the analogy of calloused hands. There's so many different analogies, but the process is the same. The truth is the same. That nothing ever of real quality ever is achieved without some sort of sacrifice, suffering, struggle, and the degree of struggle is what's going to determine the degree of success. Now, there's times where you're going to struggle a lot and get a little bit of success, but that's okay because again, it's not the result; it's the process. So even though you might have struggled harder than anybody. Let's say you have a physical limitation and you show up to a martial arts class. You're going to struggle more than the average student just to do a basic thing. But if you stick with it, if that student is able to do that technique right away, and it took you 6 months to be able to do that, the amount of growth that you did is so much more than the amount of growth they did, because they weren't, the challenge wasn't as much. So even though they might have achieved the same result as far as the technique goes, the growth curve is so much more. And the way that shaped you is going to be so much more. And you, again, looking things mentally and physically, emotionally, that you're, even though physically this person may be more athletic than you, so they're able to achieve more physically than you in a shorter amount of time, your mental endurance could very well have grown so much more than this person, because this person has an expectation of themselves. Whatever, I'll do it. It's easy. But for you, you put so much mental focus into it, so much energy into it, that the way you grew inside, you're actually more advanced than they are. And also, I find sometimes when things come easy for people, they become actually soft inside. And the first time they meet real challenge, they're like a paper tiger. The first time they actually meet real resistance, real challenge, they crumble. Where this person that fought through all of that, blood, sweat, and tears to achieve what this person very easily achieved, has that fortitude inside that when they meet that challenge, they already know what pain feels like. They're going to go right through it. So I think that's the bigger lesson here on this that is important, that I think that people need to understand, that it's the process that shapes you. It's not about the result. It's about the process, because that's what's going to build you, and you're going to benefit on a long-term growth. So anyway, I got to go. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. I'm trying to grow this channel, so definitely do it. I will continue to produce more videos. I hope you find it helpful. Please like any videos that you like. I love the comments. Thank you for the chat stream. I like all of that. Go ahead and leave some comments on the videos as well, as long as they're constructive and respectful. No drama, no drama. Just keep it constructive and respectful. If you don't like it, if you don't like the video, just move on, right? But anyway, thanks again. And as I say all the time, stay happy, stay healthy, and keep training. No matter what, you are the one that decide whether or not to keep going or to stop, because as my good friend David said, it's the mind that quits before the body. So you're in the driver's seat. You're in the driver's seat. Always remember that. Whatever anybody else says, it's your decision. So keep going. Don't ever quit.